Daughter of the Yellow Dragon, a Mongolian epic, Fractured Empire, Book 1, written by Starr Davies, narrated by David Wiseman, dedicated to Jack. Under the eternal blue sky, the great Genghis Khan blessed our lands, brought order to the disordered, and gave us heirs. Along the white road, his descendants walked, expanding our empire until desire overcame pride. And from this black road came the curse of the rabbit demon, the desire to covet what was not ours, to draw blood for blood. Soon after, all that remained of the once great Khan's descendants was bathed in blood and lost to time like sands in the Gobi. As the age declined, we fell into disorder, abandoned our cities, and retreated to the north, licking our wounds. Prologue, Boy in the Basket. East of Kyrgyz Lake, Kongai Mountains, summer 1453. Thunder rumbled across the foothills of the Kongai Mountains, created by the hammer of hundreds of hooves pounding against the unforgiving rocky ground. Another volley of arrows whistled across the wide blue sky toward Lady Samura's hand-selected warriors. Unabulid didn't dare glance back as he heard a horse squeal and crash against the rocky earth, tumbling end over end and crushing the rider. Or as dust coated his face and made his mouth dry, he didn't slow to assess the number of casualties this most recent volley claimed. Escape was paramount. He had given his word, and his word was iron. Being given such an important task at barely 15 had made him determined to succeed and prove his worth. It also offered him a chance to avenge his family by undermining Essen's reign. Unabulid leaned closer to his own horse, urging it onward at breakneck speed. They passed spotty lines of fir trees in a blur of motion, their scent mingling with the smell of horse and body odor. The horse bobbed its head and huffed out quick breaths. It was a fine horse Lady Samur had given him, and one of the fastest, but it couldn't outrun arrows. Essen's men outnumbered his own 20-1. Unabulid and the rest of Lady Samur's warriors had attempted to make a stand, fighting Essen's own elite warrior, but they could not hold against superior fighters in superior numbers. Above all else, the Borgian heir must survive. Samur had urged her men when she had set them upon this critical task. Above me, above your men, above you. Bayon is the last blood and bone of the great Khan, Genghis, the last true son of the Borgian tribe and your future great Khan. If he falls into the hands of Essen's men, he will not survive. Unabulid vowed to escape Essen's grasp, along with the rest of the men riding with him, and deliver the 3-year-old child to the safety of Lady Samur's allies in the east, Unabulid's own brother and Kurchin tribe. He knew that was the reason Lady Samur selected him, but it still filled him with self-importance. A vow was a vow, and his word was iron. Unabulid had tied the child in a basket for safety. He was youngest and lightest of all the men, so they had tasked him with care of the basket for a quicker ride. They had hidden the basket in a hole in the ground near the Kongai foothills before engaging Essen's men in battle. If none returned to Bayon, the child would die in that basket. Unabulid! Alton called from beside him. Alton glanced over his shoulder and ducked low to his horse as an arrow narrowly missed the space his head had just occupied. This will not work! The Oirat will overrun us or kill us with arrows in short time! Unabulid risked a glance back, clutching the reins in tight fists. He swore a vow to Lady Samur that he would see this done and escort the boy to his own tribe where Bayon would be safe. His own brother had returned weeks ago to secure control over their Kurchin tribe. My word is iron, he thought, remembering those same words from his own father. Oaths were unbreakable. Without honor, a man had nothing, and Unabulid was determined to prove himself a man. "Let us circle around and engage the force to buy you time to make off with the child," Alton said. Unabulid reached for his bow, but Alton shook his head. "It has to be you. Go, retrieve Bayon Monkey, and take him to your brother as Lady Samur commanded." Unabulid eased his grip on the bow, and returned all his attention to the foothills where the basket waited. Alton released a ferocious war cry, "For the Borgian! For the Great Khan!" The rest of Unabulid's companions broke off, circling their horses around to engage with Essen's men, bows drawn and arrows already returning fire. The horse beneath Unabulid continued snorting as he veered away from battle toward the foothills, hooves beating the ground, but not loud enough to drown out the clash of battle he had left behind. Men shouted, arrows whistled in the air, swords clashed, horses whinnied and shrieked. The sounds soon receded, and Unabulid fell into rhythm with his horse, leaning close to maintain full speed. His own body bobbed in tandem with the dip of the horse's head, taking short, even breaths with the beast. The Kongai Mountains rose higher as he neared them, their rocky majesty providing a promise of success, of escape. Bayon Monkey was close. Unabulid would retrieve the basket, secure it to his horse, and escape into the mountains where Essen's men dared not go. Too many opposed Essen so far to the east after he had murdered so many of the Borgian lords. Borgian loyalists crawled the mountain passes, waiting to pick off any who dared enter, but for one exception. Bayon Monkey, the future of Mongolia, a true Borgian prince. The familiar sound of approaching horses echoed off the foothills. Unabulid hoped the men had succeeded in routing Essen's force. His horse was slowing and wouldn't be able to run much longer. Unabulid reduced the pace slightly, hoping to increase the distance they could travel before the horse gave out. The hooves closed the distance with each passing breath. Unabulid glanced back, only to have his hopes dashed. Essen's men approached. Only a handful remained, either successfully killing Lady Samur's men or breaking formation to pursue him while the others engaged in battle. At the rate they closed in, Unabulid could not afford to stop and pick up the basket. He could not afford to lose any speed before reaching the protection of the mountain pass. The handle of the wicker basket peeked over the edge of the hole in the distance. Unabulid checked the progress of Essen's men. 50 yards. At this pace, his horse might just barely make it into the pass before they closed in on him. He could still outrun them, as long as he didn't slow his speed. The basket was close now, and Unabulid didn't have the luxury of time to decide on a suitable course of action. Instead, he followed his instincts and let his father's training kick in. Unabulid removed the string from his bow with a swipe of his hand, tucking the string in the belt of his deal. Without the string, the limbs of the bow curled outward into a hooked shape. Unabulid wrapped the reins around one hand, which he used to grasp the pommel of the saddle in a sturdy grip. In the other hand, he turned his bow to use as a hook. Applying his thighs for balance and strength, he shifted his body to the side to bend closer to the ground. With a mighty swoop, Unabulid hooked the basket handle with a limb of his bow and tossed it into the air ahead of him with a powerful thrust. Essen's men persisted, but their focus shifted to the basket as it tumbled from the wide blue sky toward the earth. A few arrows zipped toward the basket, narrowly missing the wicker. Unabulid held his breath as he righted himself in the saddle and released the death grip on the reins. Knees guided the horse forward, and holding his balance, Unabulid stood and stretched toward the basket. It fell perfectly in his outstretched hands. The men giving chase released a war cry. Unabulid let out a whoop of victory and maintained his speed as he secured the basket to the horse. Then, The two of them raced into the mountain pass, where other tribes were waiting to provide cover. Essen's men did not stop, not even as the arrows of the other tribes hiding in the upper passes of the mountains rained death down on them. Not until the very last of them died behind Unabulid. Chapter 1. Spirit of Cutullune. Ongut Territory, Eastern Mongolia, Spring, 1464. A warm breeze ruffled the hem of Mandukhai's riding deal, a simple tunic wrap worn by the Mongol people. The spring breeze carried with it the promise of a coming summer, and she closed her eyes, smelling the fresh grass in the air and savoring this moment of peace. All around her, the Ongut tribe busied themselves loading carts with the promised bride price. Women fussed over linens and chests of precious silver and jewels. Men checked the horses and oxen to ensure they were prepared for the journey ahead. Mandukhai did her best to ignore them all, to ignore her fate. The bones had been cast, the bargain struck. Mandukhai would marry Mandul Khan, the ruler of the Mongol nation, and a man she had never laid eyes on. 10 steps away, her mother and stepfather consulted with the soothsayer once more, before her departure, to be certain Mandukhai's journey would be without peril. She wished she could not hear their conversation, but the breeze also carried with it the hushed words. "It is assured," soothsayer Jatai said confidently. He glanced her way. She pretended not to notice. "Your daughter will become the queen and bring honor to your family and her father's name." Mandukhai had only just turned 16, and the last thing she dreamed of was becoming a queen. As a girl, her father had told her stories of Cutullune, the fierce warrior princess and daughter of Kaidu Khan, of the Chagatai Khanate, nearly 200 years ago. Cutullune earned the respect of the men around her with her superb fighting skills. The tales Mandukhai's father had spun depicted Cutullune as superhuman, able to ride into enemy ranks and snatch captives as easily as a hawk could snatch a chicken. Mandukhai could also ride with proficiency, shoot with accuracy, and hunt with stealth. Her father instilled a deep desire to be strong and respected, like Cutullune. "I don't want to be a queen, father," she thought, holding her hands into the sleeves of her deal. "I want to be a warrior, like Cutullune." But a bargain had been struck between Mandukhai's tribe and the Great Khan's advisors. The Oirat had a stranglehold on the Great Khan's trust, and after Mandukhai's father betrayed Essen, lord of the Oirat, when she was only 4, the Ongut had struggled to maintain peace between the opposing sides of a war. Mandukhai was the peace offering. Daughter of the Ongut, and of the very man who betrayed Essen, she was the perfect choice. They had promised her to another great Khan years before, but he died before Mandukhai came of age. She had hoped that his death would bring about her freedom. She never envisioned herself as a prize or a Khan's wife. The young dreamer in her had always fantasized about meeting a strong man able to best her in wrestling or archery, someone who understood how to read the eternal blue sky and predict the weather, someone who knew how to live the life of a nomad, as she did, a man who could see her for who she was and not just as a potential womb for sons. "It is time," her mother said, guiding Mandukhai's horse by the reins. Mandukhai shuddered. Her mother's forehead creased in sympathy. "Any girl would be thrilled to make such a match. You have been gifted a great honor, Mandukhai. You will be respected and cared for. Your marriage brings us peace, and your children will inherit the nation." But Mandukhai didn't want to be cared for. She was perfectly capable of caring for herself. to ride with proficiency, shoot with accuracy, and hunt with stealth. Knowing this was goodbye, and that she may never see her mother again, Mandukhai thrust her arms around her mother and hugged her tight. Such displays were for children, but if these were her final days as a child, Mandukhai intended making the most of them. Her mother hugged her back and whispered in her ear, "Remember what I told you about men. Be wary of who you trust. Keep Nergui close. He is sworn to protect you above all others." "I will," Mandukhai murmured back before letting go. The withdrawal of her mother's arms sharpened the cool spring air. Mandukhai wanted to retreat back into her embrace. "Lady Mandukhai," Nergui said, from several feet away, mounted and ready to ride. Mandukhai spun around, scanning the carts and seeking any excuse to delay the inevitable. They had packed her felts onto a cart, felts she had dedicated years to pressing from wool for the future structure her husband's family would provide. All was in order. Once more, Mandukhai said goodbye to her mother, who sniffed one cheek. Mandukhai prayed her mother would not sniff the other. When she did, Mandukhai's heart fell into the pit of her stomach. Her mother did not expect to see her again. Raising her chin proudly, afraid of showing any sign of weakness to her tribe, Mandukhai mounted her horse and started her journey away from the eastern steppes of her Angut tribe, to Manke Bulag, where Mandul Khan had established his capital. She didn't look back as her mother made offerings of milk to the Earth Mother. The saddle creaked as Mandukhai rode beside Nergui, surrounded by a distant guard of men. Only one servant accompanied Mandukhai. The rest would be supplied by the great Khan once they married. 2 young girls from the tribe had come along, but one had died 1 week into the trip after drinking unboiled river water. The other girl had had a fever. Mandukhai had attempted mixing silver shavings into the girl's tea each night so the magical properties of the metal could heal her. The fever finally took the second girl as well. None of the silver could heal the girl's ailment. Mandukhai's one job was to protect them and keep them in the great Khan's court until they found a suitable marriage match. She had failed before even arriving. At night, she heard the men whisper when she was supposed to be sleeping. Such death proved an ill omen. Once she was delivered and they had attended the marriage festivities in honor of the Angut, they would return home and leave her to her fate. Only Nergui and Tuya would remain behind to protect her. The men sounded eager to wash their hands of her. The hushed conversations drove Mandukhai closer to Nergui's side on days such as today, where the men rode in a ring far enough that even their arrows would not reach her. Nergui observed their surroundings, as if expecting attacks to come from thin air. His vigilance was admirable, but she felt it a bit unnecessary with so many others around them. Their group was set to arrive in Manke Bulag before sundown. A rider had been sent ahead to alert the great Khan's men of her arrival. "What can you tell me of Lady Yeke?" Nergui asked for the 100th time. The politics of the court had been hammered into Mandukhai's memory for months, and Nergui tested her knowledge every day to be sure she retained the information. "Lady Yeke is Mandul Khan's first wife, and daughter of the great Khan's vice-regent, Bigerson of the Uyghur," Mandukhai recited, followed by a puff of irritation. "Her marriage to the great Khan created an alliance between the southern tribes and the Yuan." Nergui watched her, waiting. She knew what he waited for. "Lord Bigerson is a warlord and the great Khan's senior military advisor. He also controls what remains of the Silk Route," Mandukhai spouted, allowing the boredom to bleed through her tone. And his allegiance? To the great Khan. Nergui frowned at her in a way that narrowed his eyes. To the Uyghur and Oirat, she sighed. The Oirat, who murdered her father after he betrayed their leader Essen 10 years ago. Mandukhai loathed the Oirat, and was well aware that her new husband had an Oirat mother. Regardless of what she thought of her marriage to Mondul Khan, Mandukhai recognized the significance. Lady Yeke brought the southern tribes to the Great Khan's circle, and Mondul himself hailed from Oirat Borgian bloodlines, which left Mandukhai's tribe alliances in the east. This union would bring all corners of the Mongol nation together for the first time in centuries. It offered her some solace. As they crested a hilltop, a field of hundreds of domed Ger homes covered the expanse of the valley along the edges of the Orkhon River. Even from a distance, Mandukhai could make out Mondul Khan's home among them, a larger, taller dome, with blue banners fluttering on the gentle breeze. A small party rode out to greet them as Mandukhai's own guards closed their circle and formed ranks around her. How do you address the Khan? Nergui asked under his breath as they rode close. My old Lord Khan, Mandukhai said, smirking. Nergui grunted. Get it out of your system now, girl, because the moment we are within earshot, you must show respect. My father taught me respect is earned, she said, sitting straighter in the saddle. Where did that get him? The words were as good as a blow, and she flinched, sinking back. No amount of garnered respect had saved her father from Oirat arrows. They killed him just the same. What about wrinkled, old Khan? She asked, hoping to inject humor back into the tense moment. Joke all you want, but he will be your husband, Nergui responded. Old, young, wrinkled, hairy, smooth, you will perform your duty, regardless. The food in her stomach churned at the thought. Her mother had instructed her on how to act and what to do when the time came to consummate the marriage. Mandukhai wanted no part in it. The entire act sounded horrific. The capital nestled in the heart of the Orkhon Valley, along the eastern shores of Orkhon River that fed through all the surrounding land. Across the river, a birch forest encroached on the rocky banks, and at the forest's back, the looming Kongai Mountains. It was a beautiful, rich land for herding. Enough now, Nergui muttered as they drew close enough to be heard. Mandukhai scanned the party that came to welcome her. Several men clad in black armor sat on horseback, alongside a woman in silk with a Bakhta headdress that marked her out as Lady Yeke, and a young man with bushy eyebrows and a warm smile. Surely that was not Mondul Khan. He looked far too young, though she supposed she could consider him attractive. Welcome to Monkey Bulag, Lady Mandukhai, the young man said. Mondul is preparing for the ceremony. Lady Yeke and I have come to escort you to her ger, as Mondul's men construct yours. Thank you, my lord, Mandukhai said in an even voice she practiced for this day. The corner of his mouth curled up in a crooked grin. Please, call me Togachi. No lording necessary for you. Mandukhai simply inclined her head and followed the welcome party, casting glances toward Lady Yeke. The woman was hardly a great beauty, with her large hooked nose, long face, and sharp features cast in perpetual anger. The way Lady Yeke rode in her saddle was stiff and straight, uncomfortable, unlike Mandukhai's own natural ease. The swell of music and general merriment had begun already, all throughout the maze of gers making up Monkey Bulag. Mandukhai had never loathed such sounds as much as she did this day, and tonight she would be a wife. Again her stomach churned. High heavens, give me the courage and spirit of Lady Cutaloon.
If you enjoyed this sample, click the links in the description to hear more. Do you want free audiobooks, ebooks, or autographed paperbacks? Join me on Patreon at patreon.com/szdavies_character-assassin. You'll gain access to my Discord server, behind-the-scenes updates, merch, and so much more.